Hello, and welcome to episode 342 of the Juicebox Podcast. Today's show is sponsored by Omnipod and Dexcom. You can find out more about the Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitor by going to dexcom.com/juicebox. And to find out more and even get a free no-obligation demo of the Omnipod tubeless insulin pump sent directly to you, go to myomnipod.com/juicebox. Today on the show, I'm going to be speaking with Kyle Banks. Kyle is a Broadway actor, and I'm sure you've probably seen him, because I think we've all seen The Lion King on Broadway, right? Like everybody? Anyway, Kyle has type 1 diabetes. He's here today to talk about his journey, as well as what's going on currently in the world, and to also tell me a little bit about his organization called Kyler Cares, which you should check out at kylercares.org. Don't be shocked. Kyle has an incredibly deep voice. He's going to make me sound like a 5-year-old girl singing in the choir. Please don't forget that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Please always consult a physician before making changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. Do you hear me trying to get deeper so that in a second it sounds like I'm not like a pit? Wait till you see. Kyle's got a nice voice.
Kyle Banks here, actor, and was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes about 5 years ago, this coming November.
How old are you now, Kyle?
I am 43.
43. So, wow, 38.
Yeah, diagnosed later in life. Anyone
in the family that made you feel like this was a possibility or no?
I'm the only lucky one.
Well, I assume that means you get the bigger piece of meat at Thanksgiving and things like that.
Oh, yes, for sure.
Give it to Kyle. He got the diabetes.
Yeah, I definitely use it to my advantage.
No kidding. Well, that's I guess to say that I'm shocked by the age is a little bit of a fallacy because I've interviewed enough people now at every age to know it happens, but it really just isn't in what you would consider the sweet spot of getting type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, most definitely.
How did it present?
I mean, people used to tell me this all the time, and it would piss me off in the beginning. But now I totally get what they mean. If they would say, you're lucky that you were diagnosed later in life. And I'm like, what do you mean? This is horrible.
Right.
Why would anybody want to be diagnosed with this at all? But I totally get what they mean, because to be diagnosed with it earlier and just knowing that all that goes into it, and all that it requires of you, I do share that sentiment now.
I would have to think, and I'll be, obviously I don't know, but a couple of things come into my mind. First of all, the idea of complications. The earlier you start, the more time diabetes has to work on you.
Yes.
But also, as an adult, it's got to be a little easier to see a shift in your life and adjust to it than
most definitely,
right? Things like that have happened to you before, right? I mean, not on this scale, but still, you've had a place to live and then suddenly not had a place to live. Had a I don't know, you were dating somebody and then all of a sudden they were gone. Like that kind of stuff is an adjustment when you're 18, or that's tough. So
and I've also made decisions like for my life as far as like nutrition and just certain things that I've removed from like my diet and the way in which I've developed like exercise and have incorporated that to my life. Now I'm definitely much better suited to deal with it now than I would have been years ago.
So where were you, I guess professionally, what were you doing at 38?
Well, I've been performing on Broadway since I was 25. Okay. So I was on tour at the time of my diagnosis and traveling. It just been wrapped up 3 months in Canada and had just gotten to California. We were touring California for about 2 months.
How Help me understand that and explain it to people, because I live close enough to New York that when you say Broadway, there is a picture I get in my mind. But people who live across the country, when shows are incredibly popular, eventually they hit the road, right?
Right, they hit the road. I was touring with Lion King at the time, and Lion King is based in New York, where it sits. But there's also a touring production that tours the country.
Okay.
So I bounce back and forth between the Broadway production and the touring show.
That's interesting. So, wow, is that based on your desire to move around? I mean, I'm assuming there's some people who don't want to tour, or is it not within your purview to make that decision? Do they just tell you this is where you're going now? This is where you're performing?
It's totally up to me. Like, no one's putting a gun to my head saying you have to tour. No, but initially I was on Broadway for like maybe 5 years, and I was asked if I would be interested in going out to the tour to fill in sometimes. And initially I was like, no, I'm working in New York. Like, why would I go out to the tour and perform in Kennebunkport, Maine? Something like that. But I had no idea that the tour actually pays more money, a lot more money.
And you don't have to pay to live in New York anymore. It's probably like getting 2 raises.
Oh, yes. So I was like, why? After I learned that, I was like, why did you come to me sooner with this offer?
When we were really young, my wife worked for a company that was in Manhattan, and she commuted in and out every day. And then one day she didn't anymore, and she was in New Jersey, and her first paycheck came after New Jersey. And I called her on the phone. I was like, yo, they made a big mistake. Don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
But it was just not paying the taxes in New York.
Exactly.
Huge. Yeah. Very cool. That's cool. So how long did you do how long did you perform in Manhattan, and how long were you doing the touring?
Well, I'm a swing. It's called a universal swing. So I hop in and out of the show as needed. People take it's like a real job. So we have like vacations. People to take time off the sick leave, and because Lion King is such a high intense show with the physical activity, there are a lot of injuries. So I hop in as needed. So I part of the time I'm in New York, part of the time I'm on tour. It just depends on where the need is. That's
interesting. It's not something that would ever, I mean, it makes perfect sense, but it's not something that would occur to me. That's really...
Yeah, the show has to go on regardless, like what's going on with the actors. So there's always someone there to fill in.
Can you do multiple roles?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you have like a sweet spot, like where you did one more than another, or does it not even work like that?
Yeah, it doesn't work like that. It's just basically where the need is. And, really cool. And the principal characters, they're really good about coming to work and just being there and being present. But, sometimes, injuries happen. Like I said, people just need a break for family time or personal reasons or whatever the case may be.
So you're in Canada, headed to California, and what's the first sign you don't feel well?
Well, I began having vocal issues in Canada. So I was traveling back and forth to the States to visit ENT specialists. There you go. To visit ENT specialists to sort of help me figure out what was going on with me vocally. And once we got to California, I was still having issues. So I continued to visit specialists in whatever area we were in, just so that I could get through work. And each specialist prescribed for me prednisone, the steroid, to help deal with some of the inflammation I was experiencing on my vocal cords. Mm-hmm. I was on prednisone for about 2.5 months at a very high dose. And so maybe about towards the end of like the 2.5 months, I began experiencing like these other symptoms that just started out of nowhere, like the extreme hunger and extreme thirst and the constant urination and exhaustion, which is just awful when you're doing a show like The Lion King, because what you need most is energy. Mm-hmm. And I didn't pay much attention to it. I just noticed that I was feeling off. But what really got me to visit a urgent care physician in California was I just looked in the mirror one day and I was like, wow, I look really gaunt.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't even noticed that over the course of 3 weeks, I'd lost like 30 pounds.
Okay.
Wow. And that scared the hell out of me. So I ran to the urgent care doctor that day, and he said he tested my glucose, and he suspected that I had steroid-induced type 2 diabetes.
Interesting. And
suggested I go to the emergency room. I was like, well, I can't do that. I have a show in like 2 hours. But we'll just, he prescribed metformin for me. So I began taking the metformin. And 2 weeks later, I wasn't feeling any better. Mm-hmm. So I spoke with my mom, and she suggested that I come to New Orleans and visit her doctor and get a formal checkup.
Right.
And at that point, that physician instructed me to go to the emergency room.
So I'm looking at you, but I'm only looking at you from like chest up, but you look like a bigger person. 30 pounds. Where were you when you lost 30 pounds? How much did you weigh?
I was typically like between 175, 180.
Wow. You went down to like a teenager's weight.
Yeah.
How tall are you?
6'2".
Oh my goodness. You must have broken F almost.
I was looking like Skeletor.
No kidding. And out there trying.
It happens so fast. I know that's a drastic amount of weight, but I mean, when it falls off so quickly,
you don't see it.
You don't see it.
Yeah, I can only see Arden in a couple of photos, and then think, how was it possible that we didn't notice that she lost weight? You know.
Yeah. When I look back at photos of me, like we take a lot of photos, we clown a lot backstage, mm-hmm. So I definitely looked ill. I did not look well at all.
At some point, someone had to make the joke that you look like the weak gazelle, and the lion was definitely going to get you.
Well, the dancers can be a little sick in that they, the ballerina body, and everyone wants to be slim, and so they're like, "Work, you look amazing."
You're like, I look amazing, but I feel like I'm going to pass out.
Right.
Really, that's terrible, man. It really is. Especially too, because I can see a bunch of things coming into your head. At 38, I mean, you're in an amazing shape. Obviously, the only thing on me that is built like you is like one of my fingers. They're pretty thin, and so like you're in great shape. But I think my bigger point is that at 38, do you start thinking, am I getting older? Like, is this just time coming after me, or
Yeah, that was definitely a thought. Like, maybe my metabolism is slowing down. Maybe my endurance is slowing down. Like I couldn't figure out what was going on. I just started taking more vitamins in that moment, hoping that it would help.
Just using, I realize you've been in other things, but just using Lion King, what's the time frame? You arrive when? How long does the show run? How long are you actually on stage?
We arrive at the show a half hour before the curtain goes up. Mm-hmm. And that gives us enough time to like warm up, stretch, vocalize, put on makeup and wardrobe for the show. Mm. And the show runs for 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Okay.
So it's a long show.
And I'm assuming you're walking probably to the theater, and then there's just a lot of activity, and then
there's a lot of, yes.
And then you're out there doing what you're doing, and everything's, so is it a height? So I tried to figure this out. Because we've been to a number of shows in my life, not just a couple, but a lot. And it's interesting, if you hang around a little bit or you're having lunch across the street afterwards or something, you'll see the performers just roll out the back door. Mm-hmm. And it's no different than if you hang out at a baseball game long enough in the parking lot, eventually you will see 40 guys walking to their cars, leaving the game. And I use my son as an example. Like when he's like, they're so loose in the dugout when it's not their turn to do something. And then all of a sudden it's like work time, and something comes over them. So now I'm imagining that behind the curtain, there are just a bunch of foolish people making nonsense, right? And then all of a sudden it's time to roll out on stage and do your thing. Is it sort of like that?
That is the most accurate description I've heard. For sure.
That is very fun. Now it makes me wonder what those Rockettes are doing during the Christmas show.
I mean, it's just madness backstage. I mean, the real show happens behind the curtain, for sure.
That sounds really interesting. There is an absolutely wicked thunderstorm going on outside of my house right now. So if I suddenly get whisked away, out of respect to me and what I've given, don't forget to go to my Omnipod juicebox to get yourself a free, no obligation demo of the Omnipod tubeless insulin pump sent directly to your door. Why do you want to do that? Well, perhaps you've been thinking of changing pumps. That's one reason. Maybe you're taking injections or have a pen right now and you want a pump, but you don't know which pump to get. The Omnipod is, besides my daughter's pump for many, many, many years, the only company that will send you a demo to your home so that you can try it on and wear it to see if you like it before making a commitment. That's pretty damn good, isn't it? Try before you buy. No obligation whatsoever. Right to your door. myomnipod.com/juicebox. Now, when their package arrives, when your demo pod gets to the house, I'm saying, you're going to be able to wear it wherever you want, take a shower, sleep, frolic, whatever that means to you. Maybe do your gyrations, your working out, however you stay in the fitness, and see, wow, this is what my pod would be like if I had this. Then you've got a really good idea of, what you're in for. And I think what you're in for is tubeless, wireless insulin pumping. Being able to set temp basals and extended boluses from a little handheld device. Bang, bang, just like that. And Omnipod stands behind their stuff. Customer service there is astoundingly good. And I have found that to be true for Arden's entire life with diabetes. Arden has had an Omnipod since she was 4 years old. She's going to be 16 this summer. And I don't call, if I have a customer service issue, I don't call Omnipod and be like, hi, it's me, Scott, from the podcast. Please give me extra good service. That's not how that works. I call in like everybody else, and I get the same great service that everybody else gets. I don't think I can say enough great things about the Omnipod tubeless insulin pump, and at the very least, it is worth a shot. Check out the free, no obligation demo. Now, you've got yourself an Omnipod, kind of projecting to the future. You've got yourself an Omnipod, but you really want a Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitor to round out the package, right? You want to be able to give yourself insulin in a timely way, in a discreet way, but you'd also like to know when that would be a good idea. You want to see your trends. Am I 89 and rising, 89 stable, 89 falling? All different situations. The Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitor can give you that information. That's the kind of data that comes back constantly to your iPhone or Android, or to a Dexcom receiver if you don't want to use it with your cell phone. But if you have it on your phone, well, that opens things up, doesn't it? Imagine your child off at school or at a playground, when we're allowed to go to playgrounds again, and you're at home or out in the parking lot doing whatever it is you're doing. I'm thinking playing like Words with Friends, probably trying to avoid little kids at a park, but that's not the point. You're anywhere you want to be, and you can see a loved one's blood sugars. What speed, what direction. It's amazing. Anywhere. A person using Dexcom can share their blood sugars with up to 10 people if they want to. It's really excellent. That's like a school nurse, a mom, a dad, a grandmom, a best friend, your neighbor, whoever. It's up to you. Dexcom.com/juicebox. Get started with the Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitor today. Okay, I didn't get blown out the window, but the storm is raging, and I was here very bravely recording this ad. So, check out the advertisers. There are links at juiceboxpodcast.com right there in your podcast player. Of course, you can just type them into your browser. myomnipod.com/juicebox and dexcom.com/juicebox. All right, let's get back to Kyle, his amazingly deep voice, and hear the rest of his story. When you're diagnosed 5 years ago and the metformin and all that goes away, you're down with your mom. It's interesting in Louisiana that you found, how am I saying this? When I ask people for a doctor, when I ask people for recommendations for great doctors, there are some parts of the country I get less recommendations from. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so I'm just wondering, obviously your mom had a real good feeling about this doctor. He sees you or she sees you, you have type 1 diabetes. Then what's the next step? What do you do next?
I was hospitalized for 2 days and was given the instruction about how to inject insulin and released, sent out into the world to
That's it.
Begin my new life with type 1 diabetes.
Yeah. Did you put on any weight in the hospital?
Yeah, my weight came back immediately. I probably gained back all of the weight I lost in just as fast as I dropped it.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
And my body was just starving for those nutrients. And once the insulin got in, it was able to process it.
Do what it was supposed to do again. Have you looked back yet and thought, wow, I was almost dead? Have you had that thought?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I could remember like after the show, I'd be so exhausted. Like I would have to sit in my dressing room and the last thing we want to do is hang out in the theater after the show. We just want to get out and just do whatever we do after the show. But I would literally have to sit in my dressing room for sometimes 2 hours, just gain enough strength to like put on my pants and wash the makeup off of my face and walk to the hotel room across the street. It was definitely I know I was really close to dying.
Yeah. Especially when your body starts giving away like that. And the weight loss is such a big
wasting
deal.
Away. Yeah.
Yeah, no, because it starts getting into your muscles, and before you know it, I don't know. It's terrible. I look back at Arden sometimes and I think, how close were we? And, the doctors put a number on it, but they're guessing, but still they thought she'd be in a coma in another 24 hours.
Yeah.
Like when we brought her in, and I was like, how did you get to Louisiana? You didn't drive in that condition, did you?
No, flying was a thing. Before the pandemic, I was like on a plane like at least three, maybe 4 times a month.
Yeah. I get these notes now. They're like, you'll come speak at this thing? And I'm like, maybe. Maybe I will. Could I do it through like Zoom or something? Or
Right. Now I'm driving everywhere.
Can you wrap me in plastic and put me on the plane? Because then I'll do it. Just don't want to get sick. Meanwhile, it's probably going to be fine. But, I don't know. The whole world seems like it's going crazy right now. I guess for context, for time, you and I are talking towards the end of COVID-19 while people are starting to go back, and in the middle of the George Floyd riots. So, yeah, everything's
fascinating times in which we live.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm just encapsulated by it for the last couple of days. Just trying to wrap your head around everyone's perspective. And it's so clear where everyone lands. And you just think like, how are these things going to find commonality?
Yeah,
it's really ridiculous.
To say the least.
Yeah. Well, it is ridiculous, right? Because you see somebody, you see protests that seem well organized and intended. And you think, okay, that's right. And then 4 hours later, some guy's like, I could probably just piggyback off this and get myself a pair of sneakers. And and then it becomes crazy and someone thinks to light something on fire and you're like, what are you thinking? Yeah. Really is.
I hear they really went off in New York City and hit all of the high-end shops.
My daughter Arden comes running down last night. She goes, "You should see what they're ripping off in Hollywood." she's like, a lot of people are gonna have great handbags, and it's so sad. Like it really is.
Yeah.
I was listening to a family member of Mr. Floyd's, and he said he would not want people doing this, and the whole thing's heartbreaking. I don't even know how to,
It really is. Yeah. But to have people, like you said, piggybacking off of this moment, off of the protest and using it as an opportunity to cause chaos is,
or to put any other thing in motion that I'll tell you, and I know this isn't why you're on, but it's just so timely at the moment. I saw a person make the point last night that the rioting is a far left conspiracy to keep small businesses closed. And I was like, what?
Wow.
Wait, you're telling me that somebody went to Minneapolis, found a guy willing to murder someone with his knee and said, yo, we really need to keep the small businesses closed. The next time you pull over a black guy, could you kill him for me? Who thinks that way?
That's deep.
Well, it's deep crazy is what it is. And I'm like, that's, I mean, I guess the next question is, how much of this did the Illuminati have to do with? And I backed away slowly and I was like, that's enough internet for today. But anyway, it really was fascinating. what's the impact on your day-to-day life right now? Is there any, or are you just hiding inside waiting to go back to work like everybody else?
I'm just hiding inside, waiting to go back to work like everyone else. And I'm here in New Orleans at the moment with my mom, who has a lot of like underlying conditions. So I've been making it a point to like continue quarantining, not seeing any of my friends that lived here. And if we do, it's like in outside spaces where where we're social distancing properly, and just making sure I don't bring anything home to my mom. But I mean, of course, I'm affected by all of the protests. Just watching what's happening on the news, it's troubling to see.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something. The protests is definitely something that's needed. There's so much pain and suffering happening right now, and it's just like the perfect storm with George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, and then there's the situation in Central Park. And couple that with like all of the suffering from the pandemic and people losing their jobs and not having ways to like provide food for their families.
Right.
I guess nerves were just really frayed, and
it's a powder keg. It really is.
Yeah.
I kept thinking Ahmad was the guy that was jogging, right?
Yeah, he was jogging.
And I just kept thinking as this was going on, I was like, at some point, there's a tipping point in here and we're going to find it, and it's just horrible. It's horrible. And I have to say, I 100% agree with you. At some point, you have to protest. Like, you have to go out in the street. You have to yell and scream. Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't be. I mean, first of all, if you're going to steal, don't steal from a Dollar General, because what are you risking getting locked up for like a squishy ball in a cup that like holds a lot of drink? You know what I mean? Like
Debbie cake.
Yeah. Try a little harder than that, I guess. But seriously, they're coming out, and I'm like, what could you need out of there? But anyway,
well, they were definitely successful with that in New York and in LA on Melrose Place.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is just awful though.
You can't just keep things like this cannot continue to happen, and we just act like, oh yeah, this is the thing that happens every 6 months. Yeah. This happens.
And I do think it's good that the news hasn't really been distracted with their messaging about what the protests are about as a result of like all the fires that have been set and the stores that are being looted. They're still they're reporting that especially NYPD is reported that they know for sure that there are outside influences, sort of antagonizing the situation, and but it was George Floyd is still like the center of the protest. So
I heard that.
I do think that's a beautiful thing.
Me too. I had heard that too. I'm sorry I stepped on you there, but so when this happens, when people see protesting, then other groups can say, hey, listen, if we send some people in there to cause trouble, they're going to blame those minorities for that. And perfect, and it really is. Some people's minds work very deviously in a way that I can't appreciate, you know? So I'm one of those, like, I guess I'm crazy. I think just go do what you're doing, do a good job at it. That'll work out. And, and if it doesn't work out for everybody, keep going. You know what I mean? Like, that's just seems like life to me. But anyway, and it was interesting what you said before about wanting to be out a little bit, but not wanting to bring something back to your mom because she's got underlying issues. But also, if you looked at a lot of the deaths, being black was not a great thing for having COVID-19.
Oh, so,
yeah. And is that something community-wide that people are aware of, and is it discussed?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I know here in New Orleans, I have distant family members that contracted the COVID-19, and I mean, households that lost their lives, like a mother and two siblings, my mom's first cousins, so the distant relatives to me. But yeah, personally, we know, and friends of my mom's that lost their lives. So it's definitely been, so the effects of it have definitely been felt.
Right. So when Broadway opens back up, which there's no timeline for that yet, is there?
It's shooting for December, but I don't know. It's a touchy situation.
Would you be able to go back if it was December? Like for you in your heart personally?
I want to.
Yeah.
You know, I'm hoping that things. I mean, I definitely would not do it if as the way things are now.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, if there's a vaccine, or if the virus seems to take a break in the coming months, then I'll definitely consider it. I mean, I love my job. I love what I do, and to not be able to do it is a bit nerve-wracking. But
I'm picturing a lot of like paunchy gazelles jumping behind some people have been on the sofa a little too long on those first couple shows. I think, Mommy, does that lion look tired to you? He does, sweetie. He's been at his mom's house for a while. He can't get out much. Oh my gosh. How much effort would it take to put you back into physical shape to perform?
Well, I recently, maybe about a month ago, I started working out again, because sitting on the couch is definitely taking effect.
Your mom's probably cooking better than they do wherever you live.
Oh yes, most definitely. So just been stretching and working out at home, and so I'm getting in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I was talking to my son the other day, because he should have been playing baseball through the spring. And then he gets a little break, and then he goes and plays in the summer. And I said to him, I was like, you gotta, and he's working out sporadically, but he's like, it's hard to just, without a goal. He's like, you can do maintenance stuff, but when, you know, I have tasks I perform and I know how to work out to support those tasks. And he's like, and I do the workout and then I don't have the other side of it. He's like, it's kind of, it feels useless a little bit. That's interesting. It really is interesting. But basketball games are going to be much more lower scoring by the time this is all over. LeBron's going to be out there like, whoa, slow down.
I mean, the wake-up call for me was I tried to put on a pair of jeans a few weeks ago, and I was like, oh.
Well, in the very beginning, I'm sorry.
All of my clothes are like basically the same size, so unless
you don't
I
have any choice.
Shopping, I need to do something about this.
You need to be hanging out in Louisiana in your underwear. Well, I tried to, when this all happened in the beginning, I looked at myself and I was like, Scott, you cannot afford to gain any weight. So I just sort of went the other way. I've lost 11 pounds since COVID-19 started.
For you.
Because I was just like, I'm like, I'm going to have to like willfully go backwards, or I'm going to, you know, I don't know what'll happen, because trust me, I can't dance, and I can't hit a baseball either. So I'd be in a bit of trouble. When you left the hospital, was it injections, a pen? Did they give you a glucose monitor? How did all that go?
Pen, Humalog pen, and lace. Oh my God, I'm losing. It was the Humalog pen, right, and Lantus
for your slow acting.
Lantus.
And are you on a pump now, or do you still inject?
I'm on a pump and glucose monitor.
Okay. What do you use?
Mm-hmm.
You use Dexcom. What pump do you have?
Mm-hmm. Omnipod.
Omnipod. Look at you. You're right for this show.
All right. Are on twinsies.
You certainly are. Except, trust me, she can't sing. So.
You know, my pump.
I lost you, Kyle. Good, I'm going. Yeah, all of a sudden you were like, my pump, and then you were just gone. So.
Yeah, my pump actually malfunctioned about 2 weeks ago.
The PDM or your
PDM?
Pump? Oh, okay.
So I had to go back to the pins. I had some. Luckily, I had the pins, Humalog pins, and the Lantus pins on me, and I'm surprised. I have to thank you so much,
really,
honestly, because you have just given me. I feel like it might be like 2 years ago I was introduced to the podcast. It's just researching, just looking for like more information on how to better take care of myself, and it was.
That's hilarious.
So sorry.
Oh, who is that? That is a lovely
Basil.
dog. What's the name?
Basil.
Basil, like Arden's basil.
Exactly.
It's lovely.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Like if I have to think about bolusing and baseling, at least it's going to bring a smile to my
It might
face.
as well be an adorable dog. That's 100% true. I know that it makes me happier when I see him running around and have this word attached to something else. But I can't believe that Basil would bark in the middle of you saying something amazing about me. So let's not overlook that.
How dare he? But yeah, you really just gave me like the push I needed to begin making decisions with regard to my health and insulin therapy and just all of it
I'm so glad.
And it's been great because it was at that point when I heard, being bold with insulin, like, well, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
And, just listening to you talk about like your experience with helping Arlen, it just gave me the push I need to just make some necessary changes with regard to
I appreciate knowing that. Thank you for sharing that with me. What was your life like outcomes wise prior to those first 3 years, I guess?
Oh, it was just a constant yo-yo.
Okay.
Like I would go to work and make sure that my glucose was really high because I knew that by the end of work I would be crashing. So it was no real control. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just trying to get through the show. Mm-hmm. And the only way I knew to do that was to just let myself go high. Otherwise I would be crashing by intermission.
I see. How high did you have to come in at to make it through?
About 210.
Okay. And then the effort. And so that was with pens too, right?
Yeah, that was with pens for 6 months into my diagnosis, and then I moved over to the pump.
Okay, so you still had your settings were off far enough with the pump still that you. So what do you do now to get ready? Is it do you temp back your basal rates?
I temp back my basal rates. If I'm around 100, I'll cut my pot off completely for like an hour, because the activity will usually, and I'm not eating, so the activity will usually sustain me.
Yeah.
And I'll still need a snack by intermission to keep from crashing.
Okay.
But yeah, I definitely have a better system in play, a healthier system, because I would not have lasted doing that.
Oh, just a small portion of your check when you go back in December, you just send it to the house. I'll take it. Don't worry. For some tickets, just tickets maybe would be more reasonable. No,
you heard it.
That's seriously, that's really amazing. Can you, I guess was my question, can you describe to me, have you ever been performing and felt yourself going low? What do you do in that situation?
That's another thing, like the stress of like going low and having to drop out of scenes and having stage management. When something happens in that show, it's like it's just starts like a whole wrecking ball of like different departments needing to, if I drop out of a scene, and stage management has to be contacted, and they have to notify the sound department, which has to notify the wardrobe department in order to get another actor ready. And I just, at times I was going low a lot, and I would have to drop out of scenes a lot. And I just really felt like I was affecting the show in a horrible way. Although Disney they were really wonderful about it all and making me feel they were more concerned about my safety. But me personally, I just felt like I was destroying the integrity of the show at times.
And at some point, it's got to be in the back of your head, like they're not going to put up with this forever,
right?
Exactly. You know, like at some point they're going to say, "Look, we need some consistency here from you, and we're sorry about your health problems, but." You know, this is a specific job. Well, I'm glad that didn't end up being the case. And
I'm really grateful to them. It took me a while to figure it out. So they dealt with this for maybe a year.
Wow.
So they were really patient and understanding about me learning how to use this new technology that I'm using now.
That's lovely. You said that you made some adjustments to your diet. Can you walk me through what you did?
Well, not adjustments as far as being diagnosed was concerned. A few years before I was diagnosed, I began eating this plant-based diet, and so yeah, that's I consume a totally plant-based diet, and I do believe that has aided me a lot with regard to being able to gain control.
Okay. But the stuff you learned on the podcast applies just as well to plant-based as it does to prior, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, because food still, it affects your glucose. So
right. Yeah.
be it even greens. So, be it minimal, but they still have effect.
It's funny. There are some vegetables that have more carbs in them than you would venture to guess,
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I'm always interested when people, in the beginning, when you start talking to them, they're so bad. I'm sorry for everybody listening, but you guys are so bad at like guessing carbs for foods. And it's always, I don't understand. I did the right thing. It's such a confirmation bias. Like I counted right. So I'll stop thinking about that portion of it. It's something else. It's the diabetes fairy coming to get me. You know what I mean? And I'm like, no, it's just did you not count all this here, or the fat or the protein? Like that's stuff that no one tells you to think about really. And
in the beginning, maybe for that entire year, I was probably giving myself, I was dosing for 15 grams, regardless what was on my plate.
That was just your go-to.
That was my go-to.
Yeah. Now I've seen people do that. My go-to for Arden is 50. I'm just always like, if it's too much, we'll figure it out later, but we're not going to have it be too little. That's for sure. Because too little happened today. So, you and I were supposed to record a little earlier, and I had a hiccup in my day, which left me out of the house when Arden had breakfast. And Kelly did a pretty good job with her, helping her with, the overall amount of insulin, but their pre-bolus wasn't good enough. And so it started shooting up. I got home. I worked on fixing it, but I'm looking at a graph I can see. We're like 3 hours into this. Now we stopped it at 200 and now she's more like 150 and she'll be back again. So our meal disasters aren't maybe the same as other people's sometimes, but still, it was all still the same problem. She used the right amount of insulin at the wrong time. The food got ahead of her, and now suddenly we're scampering to put more in that isn't too much, and then it ruins a gap of her day. It now makes you think about diabetes for 3 hours. Yeah. Instead of just getting it in at the right time and being done with it. So,
that was another thing that I got from you, just pre-bolusing. What a game changer that was. Or that has been, I should say.
Yeah, just putting the insulin in a position to have a chance.
Mm-hmm.
Really is all you're doing, right? That's very cool. That's excellent.
You're helping a lot of people, Scott. I really hope you get that and you realize how important, informative the work you're doing is.
That's very kind of you. Thank you. I was going to say that Kyle was introduced to me by Sam. And those of you who remember, I think, what is her episode called? Sam is the Robin Hood of type. I don't know. There's something about, I know, I'm sorry about how I name the episodes, but anyway, so Sam is a person who's just amazing at handling like kind of stuff you would never think about, like with insurance companies and hammering on them to help people and stuff like that. So Sam reached out and said, Kyle wants to be on the show. And I just thought she knew you. And that was like, I was like, great. But she goes, he loves the show. And I was like, that's not true. Cause then I felt a little giddy, I was like, and I was like, that's really cool. I thought she was just being polite at first.
Well, when you texted me, I told you it's so weird. I'm like listening to you right now and now you're texting me.
I have to admit that when you said that, I felt weird too. So we were both uncomfortable in different ways. I was like, I see the downloads, but I had a conversation with a woman last night for 5 minutes who's thinking about coming on the show to talk about something touchy and difficult. And she wanted to talk a little first. And she started telling me about how the podcast helped her. And it's hard to know how to respond, honestly. Like I appreciate it and I feel it. I really do. But it's strange to have so many people saying something similar to you and you feel it every time. But if I really let myself, I'd start crying. Like you could have made me cry. If you would have went a little longer just now, I would have been like, Kyle's doing better and he gets to dance now, and Scott, you did that. And, I could easily fall apart. I'm a very emotional person. So I have to kind of hold it back a little bit, or I literally, I can't cry every time somebody sends a note. But it almost happens to me a lot. And my family makes fun of me, Kyle, when it happens, just so you know. They're like, there he is. He looks weepy. And it's unpleasant for me is what I'm saying.
Having a positive impact on people's lives can be an emotional thing for sure.
No, I appreciate that. I really do. But do you have an organization that you started?
Yes. It's called Kyler Cares. We founded it a year ago, and then our goal is to raise funds for insulin pumps and continuous glucose monitors for kids living with type 1 diabetes, especially kids coming from marginalized communities.
Okay, and so you're hoping to. You have an organization, you'd like to bring money in and then turn that money back around to people to get them devices that they can't afford.
Exactly.
You know, it's incredibly odd that you say that. And if you'll allow me 1 second to look here, I just had a really lovely phone call with a woman named Rebecca the other day. And I went out on a limb there saying her name out loud before I checked the email because, you listen to this podcast enough. I'm not good with names. But yes, Rebecca, I got it right. From something called the Fincher Foundation. And she has a foundation that's doing the exact same thing.
Wow.
And it sounds like she's pretty successful at it. So I can maybe make an introduction for you if you want to pick brains or anything like that, ever let me know. Because it's something that most of you don't know, and I don't really know how you would, but well prior to the podcast, when I realized that the blog was really popular and I wanted to do something good with it, I hadn't considered the podcast yet. And I had forms in my hand to start like a 501c3 because I with the same idea as you, I thought, wonder if I could help people pay for pumps and glucose monitors. And then I got overwhelmed by the process. So kudos to you for sticking to it, because about halfway through looking at those forms, I was like, oh boy, maybe I'm not the right person for this. It's overwhelming.
The funny thing about starting a new venture is, you have all these grandiose ideas until you realize the process, what it takes to actually see it through. Mm-hmm. So unluckily for me, I announced this idea at a convention with like 3,000 people there before I even looked into what it would take to start it. So
you know what Kyle's gonna do? Well, now you have to. Where you got to go find all 3,000 of those people and be like, shh, listen, don't tell anybody about what I said. Do you have space online that I can look at?
I do. It's KylerCares.org.
KYLERCARES.org.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay, let me take a look.
Yeah, we were planning on having our first fundraiser concert here in New Orleans in August. Mm-hmm. Was tapping into Broadway community, just connecting with a bunch of friends of mine that perform in shows like Book of Mormon and Kinky Boots and Lion King, of course. Right. Hamilton, and they were all coming down to perform in New Orleans for the concert called From Broadway with Love. Had the theater space donated as a 2,800 seat theater, the Sanger Theater. It's where all the Broadway shows perform when they travel here. Mm-hmm. Donated the space, and we were just all ready to go. Speaking with Vanessa Williams about headlining. And then COVID happened. So now
and then a bat spit on a pangolin, and now you can't, or whatever happened, and now you're done. Well,
yeah. So we're transitioning that to like an online concert.
Okay. I hope you get to do it in person one day too, because that sounds really lovely. What was the idea? Were you going to put on small portions of productions, or?
We're performing love songs from some of the most beloved musicals around the world.
That's really nice. See, I want to see that. All right, that should happen live still. We're going to get to a point. I would love to see you do that live. But I'll definitely share the link here for people to check it out and donate if they can. KylerCares.org. And the teddy bear's really adorable. So that's the first thing that caught my eye. I was like, I like how it feels like it's hanging a little bit. It's very, or up straight. I can't decide what I feel like it's doing. But one way or the other, it's a t-shirt. There should be if it's not.
It is a t-shirt.
Oh, okay. It's very nice. So how do you plan on finding people who need the help?
Well, I've been with Lion King. We do a lot of outreach throughout the years. So I was already connected to Children's Hospital. So I just reached out to them, and that's when I really began to understand like how grave the situation is, especially in communities of color. Just people with T1D from communities of colors, they're infrequently using pumps and CGMs. They lack access to the technology because of finances, or they're underinsured. They infrequently perform glucose testing. They have less contact with management staff. There's a difficulty relating to staff because of socioeconomical and cultural differences. So there's just a whole slew of problems that antagonize a really bad situation.
Did you ever, by any chance, hear me when I spoke to Anthony Anderson? And I asked him if culturally it's just one of those things like, oh, I got it, and now whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Like, this is my lot in life. I have diabetes. Is that a function of everything you just said, of not having good information or someone who can talk to you, where you can listen?
Totally. And I don't even think that it's a conscious choice that people are making just to disregard their situation. It's just the cards they've been dealt, and they don't have the resources and or the information to, tackle it properly.
Right. Yeah, it's so interesting that it's no different than any other thing. And so yesterday, my son, who I have to admit is a really good kid and does not get in a lot of trouble, he went to visit some friends and parked somewhere and got his car towed. And he called me, and nothing like that had ever happened to him. And he's like, my car got towed. And I said, well, get it back. Like I just figure it out, man. You're 20. You're a pretty bright kid. Get the damn car back, And it was interesting to watch him work his way through it, because there were just simple ideas or concepts, tools that he didn't have. And when he reached into his mind, there was no function for this problem, and it stopped him. And so I said, okay, here's what you're going to do. First thing I want you to do is go back to where you parked the car. See if there's any signs there to indicate who might have towed your car. If not, we're going to call the police department. Don't call 911. Call the non-emergency line. Ask them. And then I gave him tools. Then he went off, did it, no problem. Came right back and said, as you're talking about it, I don't see any difference between that and a health thing. Someone's put you into a situation that you just don't have a tool for, and your imagination can't find it because it just doesn't know from it, you know? And then that's it.
And the healthcare system it's impossible to navigate. So, just makes it's even when I have to reach out to, my insurance and figure out who's paying for what, and, who do I have to contact for certain things that I need. It can be really challenging, and it also consumes a lot of time.
Yeah. I can see very simply people going from all those questions that they don't have answers to, you know what, they gave me the insulin, I've got the needles, right. Let me just do this. And that's it. And then whatever is going to be is going to be. And I mean, it's very unlikely. Like, you think about the things that you've learned listening to the podcast, and you think about how long it took me, like what a weird situation I was in to even be able to do what I did. I was a stay-at-home parent. I got put in charge of a small child. I had time. I had, resources. The resources kind of fell apart. And for people who are wondering, what we're describing happens to other people. It happened to me too. I didn't walk into some magical doctor's office who was like, here's the things you're going to do. And we live in a place with a good healthcare system, and we were at a good institution, and still it wasn't like they laid it all out for me. We struggled for years. And had I not started the blog and felt some compunction to make the blog more than just, hey, diabetes sucks, right? You know, like, I don't know if I even would have ever helped Arden. And so we all can't have those, I don't know, circumstances that allow us that kind of time to get to something. You know, somebody needs to step in and say, hey, listen, I want you to get your basal right. Then I want you to pre-bolus. Then I want you to do this. And when this happens, do that. And then you learn it as you go. It makes sense to me.
Honestly, like you said, having the time to do it. I know I worked for, the only time I took off from work after my diagnosis was maybe the 3 days I was hospitalized. Then I worked for a year, just going through the motions, you know, just trying to survive with this new pump and, you know, insulin injections and figuring out, you know, walking around most of the day with exorbitantly high glucose numbers.
Right.
But after a year of that, I took a year off just because I just needed to reset and figure out what was going on with me. That's when I was introduced to podcasts, and that's really when I had the time to just study and figure out, you know, how to better take care of myself.
Yeah. I understand when I get notes sometimes from people and they're like, can you just point me to the couple of episodes I need? And I'm like, it's not that easy, you know? I'm like, and I think just take take 20 hours and listen to these, and that should get you going. I don't have time for that. And I think I understand that you don't feel like you have time, but if you listen, it's going to create so much extra time for you. Like, but not everyone's even like, I'm assuming what'd you do? Did you go home for that year?
I did. I came to New Orleans.
Yeah. Had some support. Somebody was there to help you out. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
And to your fact, at the top of the podcast, where I received care at Ochsner Hospital, and they're actually making, since COVID hit New Orleans as hard as it has, they've actually been in the press a lot. But I was surprised as well that my caregivers here, the endocrinology team at Ochsner Hospital, was so, what's the word I'm looking for? They've been so helpful and so good, and I'm surprised that they are as forward thinking as they are with regard to treating diabetes.
That's excellent. Now, I'm always excited when I hear that there are institutions that are out on the edge and leaning into good ideas, because it's the only way it's going to happen.
You know, I also have, because I spend part of my time here in New Orleans and part of my time in New York. I also have doctors in New York that I endocrinology team in New York that I work with as well. And I find that the doctors in New Orleans, surprisingly, are a bit more knowledgeable.
Yeah. Well, everybody likes to say, you know, have something done like that, go to the city, go to Manhattan. That's where you'll get it right, you know, but a good doctor can live anywhere. That's the first thing. But, and having the nerve to not be so institutional that you're more worried about not being wrong than about helping somebody is a big deal. You know, it really is. Well, that's an interesting story, man. It really is. I'm glad I did this. Actually, by mentioning current events, you got your podcast moved up 6 months on the schedule. It's going to go out this week instead of at Christmas. Because I don't want 6 months from now people going, wait, what's COVID-19?
No, that would be beautiful if that's where we are in 6 months.
Oh, I hope so. Yeah, I don't know how to wonder what's going to happen, but I do know that I completely side with what you're saying about being frightened to just go get sick. And then there's the other side of me that thinks of it on a macro level. And I'm like, we got to get going. Like, we all can't sit around like this. You're seeing what's happening. You let people sit around, not make money for a few more months and see it'll take a lot less to set them off, and I don't know where it goes from there. I always wonder too, how it feels for people who live in more remote places to flip on the news and see something happening in Boston and Philly and New York. Like, does it feel like another world to them? Or, because to me, it feels like it could be at my house at any second, because that's how close I am.
Yeah.
I
imagine so. It's been pretty quiet here in New Orleans. So we haven't been affected by like the the riots and the looting. There's been some protests, but it's been all relatively peaceful and calm, and not really a lot of numbers. But I guess that's how people felt when the quarantine first began. Like certain areas wasn't really being affected, and so they were wondering, well, why should I shut down in Idaho?
Right.
And we don't have there aren't any deaths here.
Yeah,
we're not experiencing what New York City and California are experiencing. So
I had a talk set up in Wisconsin as this was all going down in the second week of March, and they were still like, "No, you're coming." And it was like the 26th of March. I'm like, no, there won't be airplanes on the 26th of March. And they did not know what I was talking about. And then all of a sudden one day, somebody got sick in Wisconsin, and then they figured it out real quick, and I was like, it's really interesting how that happens. I always go back to, in my mind, my brother grew up here on the East Coast with us, but he moved to Wisconsin. And I took that Wisconsin gig partly because I could see my brother when I went. But so he's got an East Coast sensibility about the world. And on 9/11, he called me. He's like, is this really a big deal? What's going on? I can't tell here. And I was like, yeah, man, this is
it's
terrorism, man. This is a problem. Yeah, And he's like, all right. He's like, that's what I thought. He goes, but the way they talk about it here, a plane hit a building, blah, blah. Like, it was very, I don't know, laissez-faire in the first number of hours.
Right.
Obviously they figured it out after that. But in the very beginning, New York's one of those places, like, if you've never been there, I suggest coming in underground, which you'll end up doing unless you drive, because the first time you walk up and the sun hits your face and you look up, you'll think, I have never seen anything like this in my entire life.
It's crazy. It's intense.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to be ready.
Working in Times Square every day is definitely a treat.
Yeah. We obviously haven't been up in a little while because of all this, but it is a real, most people have never seen a building that tall next to a building that tall that goes on seemingly forever. It's so many people moving in unison, but separately. It's hard to put into words, really. Do you know what I mean? But there's a flow of people. It works. And I don't know. I love it there. I love it out here in general on the East Coast. I like that feeling that the same guy that may flip you off for bumping into him a block later, if you tripped and fell, would stop and be like, yo, you all right? You know, it's a, I don't know. It's a weird thing that it's hard to put into words unless you've been there. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you were hoping to?
No, we covered a lot, just basically definitely the organization, Kyla Cares. We're figuring out now what our first fundraiser is going to look like later in this summer. So just be on the lookout for that. And we're also going to be producing some pieces in collaboration with partnerships that we have with, like, the New Orleans Saints, the NFL, Bobo Snack Cakes, Insulin and Dexcom, which sort of like help with like marketing the message about centered around self-care.
Okay.
Because it's a really big issue. People just not having the information, not realizing that they, with just minor tweaks, that can really just make life with this disease a lot less stressful and just make life better.
Yeah. I used to joke that if people figure out what I'm saying isn't that complicated, they won't need the podcast anymore. But I don't joke like that anymore, because then other people have been ripping me off. So I'm like, it is complicated. I'm the only one that can tell you. But no, you're 100% right.
This is like one of the areas where, copying is sort of like, it's got to be flattering.
When you hear somebody, my wife is such a pain. She's like, hold on. She wants me to take the dogs out. And I'm like, she doesn't realize I'm still going. I listen, I'm not going to joke with you about it. I'll be serious with you. It is flattering to start doing something that people see and think, wow, that's great. Where it hurts a little bit is how much time and effort I put into the podcast. And then I see somebody else like trying to be like, oh, look what I thought to do. And I'm like, yeah, like not that pre-bolusing is patented. I'm not saying that, but there are ways that I explain things that I know for certain I figured out. And then I hear someone use those exact words. And then there's two feelings. There's this is great. It's getting around. But then there's the part of me who makes the podcast who wants everyone to listen to the podcast. Right. You know what I mean? So it's a very interesting, it's a weird thing. It's a weird thing to have happen because you definitely just want people to be healthy.
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah, but at the same time, I want my downloads.
and you should get them.
Those are my downloads. Don't take my downloads.
The thing I really would like to stress, especially with people of color that may be listening to your podcast, is it's not, your glucose now and how it affects you today is one thing, but the thing we really need to look out for is its effect on your life in 5, 10, 15 years from now. Because I'm in communication with people who are just having the most heinous complications. And it's awful to see someone at the age of 35, dealing with neuropathy and eye damage, or females having pregnancy complications, or young males who have to deal with erectile dysfunction in their early 30s. And life, it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, no kidding. There's just... Like everybody, there's always going to be somebody who, no matter what happens, their body's just not going to do well with diabetes. But for the most part, for most of you, for most everybody, there are certain easy things you can do to stop that stuff from happening. And it like you said, it's easy now to think, oh, that's later. It probably won't happen to me. But man, when it happens to you, there's no going back.
It's not pretty.
It isn't going to be something you want to deal with. So I appreciate that. Well, I'm going to put the link in for sure, and I'll mention it again so people hear. That link, of course, is KylerCares.org. KylerCares.org. Or if you can imagine how Kyle would say it, KYL. I can't do it. His voice is beautiful, isn't it? Makes me feel like I'm squeaky over here. Thank you so much to Dexcom and Omnipod for sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Please go to myomnipod.com/juicebox or dexcom.com/juicebox. Why did I say or? It's end. Go to both of them and find out more about the sponsors. Couple of housekeeping things first, and not that Disney needs the help, but if you've never seen The Lion King on Broadway, it is a beautiful spectacle. It is an absolute charm fest. Did you hear that thunder? It's coming. Whoop, jeez. This could be it, people. Episode 342 of the podcast. You're not getting another one. I'm going up in a cyclone, apparently. But before I do, let me ask you if you... Hi, just in case I get pulled up into a tornado, you might want to go to Apple Podcasts and leave a wonderful review of the podcast. So that other people who are finding it for the first time can trust what they're going to hear. They need to take a leap, and it might just be your review that lets them feel comfortable trying the podcast. So if you can do that, I would really appreciate it. What else? If you're looking for, some deep conversation with other listeners, check out the Facebook page for the Juicebox Podcast. There's, of course, the public page. It's called Bold with Insulin. And there's the private page, the Juicebox discussion group, where people get together and talk about management ideas. It's a really great, tight group. I'm proud of it, honestly. There's over 3,000 people in there now. Juicebox Docs. If you have a great physician that you'd like to suggest to somebody else, go to juiceboxdocs.com and send me your addition, and I'll add it to the list. It's JUICEBOXDOCS.com. And anything else? I'm going to be doing something cool next week that I can't tell you about yet, but I will tell you about it as soon as I can. I think it's going to add to my understanding of how insulin works a lot, actually. So I'm excited about that. It's embargoed for a while. I think I can tell you in a few more days. Oh, Dexcom's going to be back on the show soon. I think the CEO is going to be back probably on June 16th-ish, around there. A lot of stuff going on at Dexcom. Kevin Sayer is going to come back and fill us in on that. And I don't think, and I just recorded a really great After Dark today that I think you're going to enjoy. And next week, I'm doing a bunch of recordings with Jenny, so Jenny will be back soon. Speaking of Jenny, all of the Diabetes Pro Tip episodes are collected at diabetesprotip.com if you'd like to share them with a friend. There's no S, it's diabetesprotip.com. Takes you to the collection of the episodes from the podcast. You, of course, can listen through your podcast player, but it's an easy way to share or to revisit. Anything else? No, I think that's it. I think I've covered everything. Have I? Yeah, no, that was it. See ya.